When it comes to the personality of your track, a lot of it actually comes from the one-shots. And what I mean by one-shots are these type of sounds over here. So you can hear just a lot of different sounds that are all kind of combining together. And you can also hear that there's a nice particular flow through it. And in this particular case, it works really well with the flow of the actual track itself, which are just the kick and bass and some drums at the very start here. And what I want to show you today is how to make these kind of sounds. So as you can see, I've already had an attempt over here at making an extra one, which really didn't go well. When it comes to these kind of sounds, I usually find my more organic sounds inside of Omnisphere. So here I wanted something organic that was sounding like it was kind of screechy in a way. And I just went through the both colors back here, I believe. Either way, since we're replacing it now, that is what I'm going to do, because I still like the idea of what I was trying to do here. I just think it wasn't executed very well. So something like that is maybe a lot cooler, and that means that we have to make this note a lot longer. So maybe something like this. Going to move this one in front here, one segment in front, so that it really occupies this empty spot here. Now, quick check to see if you have subscribed to the channel and you've liked the video. And while you're down there, make sure to leave an interesting comment. I'll give you like 2 seconds to think of one. You done? So that's already a nice flow, but what I would like to do is have a little bit of a gritty sound over here that really grabs the attention for just a little moment and then kind of fades out once more again over here. So that we can use that tail to kind of build up into this part over here, where we of course go into the next segment of the drop. So I'm going to place this one again in front here. I actually should turn on my grid lines because I just made some thumbnails. So it was turned off, but we're just going to use one beat over here, and then we're just going to make a simple gritty sound. If you use the tones from my tones pack, something like that is cool. Now what I've noticed with these kind of sounds is that it's really about the almost unnoticeable movement in these sounds. So a sound like this is just a stab. Let's give it an octave lower. So that is just like a simple stab. What I want to do is I want to give this a little bit of power. So I'm first of all going to duplicate this so that we can make a stereo layer for it. Maybe a few more voices here. I like to always do an uneven amount of voices so that there's no central voice here. And this can literally be the central voice. So something like that already. And then maybe giving the sound a little bit of attack by just having this come in slightly later. And then maybe even giving a little bit of a pitch click over here. Let's give a little bit of distortion to this. And you can start to notice that it's still a zap, but there's almost like some subconscious small movements in there now. Of course, a lot of that is coming from the movement and the drifting of the detuning here. But another thing that I like to do is add an OTT to this. and then kind of slightly automating in the OTT amount. Just going to EQ it a little bit, like so. And then I'm going to add a delay. And then finally for this sound, we're going to need a reverb as well. As you can hear, finding the right reverb takes a little bit of time because you have to find the exact type that works well with the sound. And of course, now it's all about the fine tuning. And one other trick that I want to show you is right before a distortion, what we could do is have a little bit of a filter. So this 6 dB per octave filter here, I can just have that come up as well. Again, here a little bit of that movement, a little bit of changing in the sharpness of the sound. And now in terms of our stab, we have something that sounds like this. And as you can hear, it just adds a little bit of extra impact to this part over here, which was really only accompanied by some of the atmospheric sounds here. But one of the things that I do want to do, as I said, is I want to have it kind of fade into this area over here, into that fill. So the way that I'm going to do that is first of all by starting up the delay like this. Can make it a little bit more of an effect by just going down and then up again over here. Let's also do something similar with the dry wet of the reverb so that it doesn't fade out here. And we just get a nice washing out of the sound. Maybe even a little bit more of the volume kind of coming back in like this. And this should be a nice detail that nicely transitions into the fill now. Of course, accompanying that flow with another flow sound can also be nice. So one of the types of one-shots that I really like to add to my tracks, especially towards the end of drop segments where we again go into fills, are just these kind of rising transitions. I also have one over here, which is just this sound here. You can hear in this case, it's a nice long lasery riser. But again, there's different ways that you can do this. One of the things that we can do is again use the tones from my tones pack in Serum. So we're just going to tones pack volume 2. For those that do want to try out these kind of tones pack, there are free demos available for these things. And you can just follow along with any tutorial that includes the tones pack. Of course, you won't have every single cycle, but you'll have enough to actually try out the pack and see if it's something for you. So now that we have this gritty sound over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a bandpass, and this will work basically on any tone from my tones pack. You're just going to get a different vibe of this kind of sound here, and we can just bandpass up over time. And of course, that is going to be very, very easy in terms of that the patch is just going to be this one tone with this one filter on it, which is just going to turn up, and then we're going to do a little bit of EQing, maybe a little bit of delay and then reverb on there as well, and that should be the whole patch. It's just going to be about, okay, how am I going to include this in the track and how am I going to make sure that it works well with the flow? And one of the ways of doing that is by, again, kind of cutting on the fills here. So you can see me removing the delay completely over here in this case. Like the last one, it is just rising up through the fill and going through it and even rising into this portion over here where the delay tail is going to be. But this one is just going to rise up into this part and then cut out so that we have a little bit of extra space over here that is going to grab the attention, and then we go into the next segment of the drop. So again, finding the right reverb for it. It is already a cool sound, but let's put it in the right octave. So now we have something like this. And even what I would probably do here is take this atmosphere that is playing and maybe cut it out. Nice little pause there and then going back into it with that other sweep. Now what you may see is that I'm using a lot of different samples, and in general I'm using already a lot of different sounds, even though I've effectively only done the one shots for this part here. There's a few like small one shots in here, but I'm probably going to layer these up and add extra one shots to this part as well. Because in general, when it comes to the one shots, these end up being a lot of different sounds. Most of my tracks have around like 40 to 50 different sounds in there. And again, the reason for that is because with these one shots, you're really trying to kind of add the final bit of theming to the track. These are the sounds that every once in a while distract from your main sequence, or they distract from whatever other ideas that you have going on that are actually the main ideas of your track. And they just add a little bit of extra flair to them. And because these are detail sounds, they really need to be adapted to the main sounds that they're going to be placed on top of that, which essentially comes to mean that for every different sequence that you're using, for every different segment, you're basically going to need to write new one-shots. But personally, I really like that because with the one-shots, that really flares up my track, as I said. And it's really nice having this moment where you go from just a mediocre sequence like this to something that then has a little bit of that extra momentum in there, and that has a little bit of that extra flowingness in there, which a lot of the times is coming actually from the one-shots. So I tend to spend a lot of time on my one-shots. There have been one-shots that I've tried to design for like half an hour, where I have something really exact in my head and where I have a lot of space to actually work with the one-shot. Like one of the things that you have to take into account is the fact that over here you're going to have much more space where it's just going to be the kick and bass playing and no sequences yet. In this case, there's some slight drums happening here. But as you can hear, there's still plenty of space to add in extra one-shots. I've already started putting in the one-shots in here, but I probably want to add a few more. But then if you go into a space like this, where there's much less space because there's more sequences and there's more drums already playing, what I'll usually do is I'll have smaller one-shots in here, things that are just like a smaller stab, that kind of thing. Whereas over here, they tend to be longer. They tend to also be more of the atmospheric stuff. Well, this does often go into risers, which can also be in the more high energy parts. It tends to be the case that I'm leaving a lot more space. A lot smaller delay tails are happening over here. A lot less big reverbs are happening over here, because I still want the sequence to come out here. Where there are also segments of my track sometimes that are just kick and bass and one shot. As I said, again, in this case, there's extra drums in there. But you can imagine those away, and then you can imagine the amount of space that I have available just to play with the sound design of the one-shots. And if I quickly open up a different production of mine, I can give you an example of what that is going to sound like if you actually develop that out into a final idea. So as you can hear, there's a lot of different audio mangling things going on in there. And again, the whole reason why I'm able to do that is because within that track, I have a lot more space for my one-shots to actually sit in and be interesting. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. I kind of wanted to combine two different things. I wanted to show off a little bit of sound design as well as just talking about the one-shots in general. Because sometimes I focus a little bit too much on one side and sometimes I focus a little bit too much on the other side. So I'm thinking kind of combining these two ideas specifically for one-shots. You know, just the actual creation process of it and then all of the theory around it, like how to place it, where to place it in the track, how to flow with it, how to use it to actually change the energy level of your track, all of that kind of more theoretical stuff, which tends to be seen as really, really boring by most people, but which I personally really, really like. And that is also the reason why I actually wanted to cover that in this video, because if I have a dedicated video towards something like that, nobody would really click it. So that's going to be the end of this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and make sure that you're subscribed. Another way to support the channel is to do so financially, which you can do over on my Patreon page, as well as by checking out my products. So thank you if you do that. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.